I'm Lula Bents and I'm the founder of Trauma Thrivers, and I really hope that you're enjoying the group and being here. Mel and I did used to do far more lives, and we will be back doing them at some point in the not too distant future with Mandy, hopefully too, but we wanted to nip in here today and say hello. So lovely to see you all. Who wants to go next?
So as some of you will already know me, I'm Mel Curtis, and I am a trauma and addiction recovery coach. I'm also a somatic practitioner, trauma-informed yoga teacher, and meditation teacher, and trained in interventions as well. So there we go, is another string to my bow. So yeah, joined Lou a year and a half ago now, been involved with this amazing community for that long, helping her out, and now, as Lou said, we haven't been kind of on live so much because we have been busy behind the scenes, and we're going to talk to you a little bit more about what we've been busy behind the scenes doing, because it's really exciting, and we're just so pleased that we can finally bring some stuff to you that is going to be really helpful. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Mel. Mandy.
So I'm Mandy Manners. I'm also a trauma-informed recovery coach, as well as an author. I've got one book out and another book coming out in September. I'm also a professional trainer, so I work with the Coaching Academy on the Addictive Behaviours Programme, which I wrote and co-wrote and co-facilitate. And what else am I? A person in recovery myself. And yeah, I've been starting to work with Lou and Mel over the last couple of months in terms of bringing amazing training to you all, and also developing sort of personal development work for you as well. So I'm really glad to be here and to be involved, and
we're great.
Yeah, moving on to the next phase of trauma together.
Yeah, very excited to have you, and it feels like, it's like Charlie's Angels a bit now, isn't it? Three of us.
And can I just say, if there's anybody watching, say hello to us so we know that you're here. Give us little hearts and little thumbs up, and just let us know. It's really nice for us to kind of feel like we are actually talking to real life people.
Yeah. And if you're not live joining us because, you're in the middle of work, or you're not on your lunch break yet, or whatever, please do let us know when you're watching the replay, because we'd also love that as well. But without further ado, really, we're here not for long today. It won't be a whole hour, I promise you, just to talk more about trauma-informed care and life before trauma-informed, and then life after trauma-informed, or maybe even life before trauma, or an awareness of trauma.
I was going to say, I don't think I know life before trauma, Lou. Like, wouldn't that be
maybe
interesting?
That was the wrong question. Maybe I didn't quite mean life before trauma. Maybe I meant before any awareness of blooming trauma.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
I knew what you meant.
Like I was saying the other day, I don't know whether I was saying it to both of you. No, I was saying it to both of you. In fact, I was saying it to both of you, I think, on the stage at Latitude Festival that we just did on mental health, thanks to Mandy, that I was pretty unaware even about trauma until I'd been a therapist for years.
Yeah. I've always find that amazing, Lou, when you tell that story. I think it's I think that's a really good place to start today, because I think the impact, when you tell this story, like the impact that had on you, personally and professionally, is just so profound.
Yeah, and the fact that the Priory, the addiction unit that I spent a decade at, which is a hospital, for those of you that don't know it, in the UK, quite a well-known psychiatric hospital and addiction unit. And there was in fact, it was Annie. You've met Annie Bennett, Mel. I don't know whether Mandy has yet. Came in, and this is going back, God, about 18 years. and came in eventually after I'd been there a few years to run a trauma egg. So she did a workshop called the trauma egg, where you draw an egg up on the whiteboard and you'd fill it in with the traumas. But, you know, we'd have 20 or 30 people maybe in treatment at that time. And we would all as staff look at somebody's timeline and what they've been through and go, you've got trauma, you haven't, you've got trauma. So like 5 or 8 people would be pulled out to do the trauma egg with Annie, and all the others would be shuffled into another room because they didn't have trauma. I mean, it's laughable.
Yeah, I'm just interested to know, Lou, and I don't think I've ever asked you this question. Can you identify what their criteria was for whether you had trauma or not?
I think it was probably, I mean, I don't know, I'm guessing it was 18 years ago, but I think it was probably what we used to call, and we don't call it anymore because it's really not PC, a big T trauma, like a single incident trauma. So none in those days, none of those relational or what we call small T traumas, which I don't like, but none of that lack of attunement, neglect, lack of mirroring, lack of relational holding, none of that was bullying or you know, other things that weren't like massive one-off big events. They weren't considered traumatic. It's like,
yeah, and that's just 18 years ago. It's like,
yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason why we're bringing this trauma is that there's so many practitioners that are still afraid to work with trauma or are unaware of the scope of what trauma looks like. You know, certainly through my own personal journey, it was only much later, very recently, in fact, that I could identify more developmental trauma and not just the, you know, big events in my life. And I think that's kind of what's so important about being a trauma-informed practitioner, is understanding all the levels of it and understanding what it looks like and how it shows up for different people, and all the kind of things that are attached to it in terms of mental health and how it might, what it might look like for someone in terms of behavioral, you know, people pleasing or you know, fear of speaking out in public places. All of those things that we talk about on the training are need to know, you know, for everyone.
Yeah. And I think for me, because I'm a CSA survivor, my trauma was really obvious, like you were just talking about, Lou. It was kind of that, what we used to class as big T. Like there was no getting away from the fact that I had these really awful, terrible things happen to me. But what I didn't understand until later that it wasn't just about the CSA. It was about all the attachments and all the other experiences that I had after that or alongside that, or how because of that I had then interpreted other things that had caused trauma, because my nervous system was so dysregulated that it was kind of these layers, this trauma upon trauma upon trauma. So for me, whenever I had gone to address it, it was very much like the CSA was put in this container and nothing else was looked at. So I think even when we've had those kind of very obvious or overt experiences, childhood experiences, there's still so much else that goes alongside it that unless we are with a practitioner that is really trauma informed, doesn't understand how to help us to navigate.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is that, you know, we're talking about personal and professional experiences in here, guys, you know, because most clinicians and most coaches and most therapists, and I'm saying most, not all, have their own background experience of trauma, you know. So I think what we're saying is that we had to find out personally first, before professionally, that what trauma was. Is that true? And then start to be able to help to inform, because there might be people listening, I'm just trying it on, that our coaches or our therapists or our counselors or our healers in some denomination that are going, well, I haven't got trauma, or I don't work with trauma. And then there might be people watching that are, well, I've got trauma and I work with it, or I don't work with it. I'm just trying to ascertain, I guess, that what we're training is both. We're looking at personal and professional, because until you've got an awareness of what trauma is, you can't do the work on yourself, and you can't do the work on your clients either.
100%.
A bit of a long-winded way around, but I got there eventually.
You did. You got there very well, Lou, and I understood completely what you were saying and agree completely with what you're saying. And I think essentially what this comes down to is that unless we have made really good inroads into working on our own trauma, which for me, another way of wording that is regulating our own nervous systems, it's very difficult for us to then be able to co-regulate with our clients, which is such a big piece of being a compassionate and also being a grounded and safe space for our clients to be in. Yeah. But sorry, Lou, we kind of like digressed, and what I think I wanted to come round to with that experience that you had in the Priory was how that changed both what you understood personally about your trauma and then how you practiced professionally.
Oh, that's, I think, where I was going in my head, because my question then for like Mandy and you was, at what point did you realize that you even had trauma? And then once you did, what happened to your professional life? Because I was in the unenviable or enviable maybe position of already being employed as a therapist and not really knowing about trauma. It wasn't taught about so much when I trained. It wasn't really out there. And then I kind of stumbled across it. But I think I stumbled across it as well as Annie and doing that trauma egg. And it started to go, oh, it's interesting. You know, my background experience was CSA as well, but I literally, it wasn't until I saw the ACE study that I even thought that I had trauma. So I think I got a 5 or 6 score on the ACE, and I suddenly went, oh shit, I've been working in addiction. And I didn't even realize really about trauma. And I'm sorry if you met me in the early days and were one of my clients, like way back when, it just wasn't really out there then. So I think it was the ACE study that was a bit of a wake up call for me in realizing my own, and then starting to go, right, I'm really interested in trauma now. But I think lots of us start in addiction recovery world. And then we kind of stay in the addiction recovery world. And then we suddenly at some point wake up and go, oh shit, there's this whole level underneath. There's this whole other layer. I don't know whether you both relate to that, but I think that was my experience.
Yeah. I think for me, you know, like you were saying before, Mel, you know, I had a big traumatic event in my life in my, you know, my teenage years. So there was a lot to sort of pinpoint around my own addictions and my own behavior around that experience and how that triggered a lot when I became a mother. You know, and so through getting sober and, you know, looking at my own story in terms of my, you know, shame and self-esteem, we set up a podcast called Love Sober, and we were interviewing, I think we've done about 164 interviews with different people from different experiences around, you know, their drinking stories or their sort of drug stories. And there was this thing that kept on coming up around, you know, different themes around identity and discrimination. So it was around, you know, either people that were neurodiverse and had you know, difficult experiences at school, or they were you know, gay, and that had a big impact on their familial relationships, or, you know, they were, you know, from an Asian family growing up in the UK, or, you know, all these different experiences, but there was a common theme of feeling like they were othered, or feeling like they didn't belong. And so I started to think about, right, so surely trauma isn't just this big event, it can be something else. And I didn't identify as having, you know, childhood trauma necessarily. But it was only kind of breaking that down, of looking at other people's stories and the similarities, that everyone seemed to have had some experience of this, you know, feeling of not belonging, or not being attached, not having that, you know. And that was part of their drinking story, it was, you know, attaching to building a relationship with a substance, because they didn't feel like they had, you know, that in their own lives. And so kind of looking through that was just like, hang on a second, this is all trauma, you know, bullying, you know, racism, discrimination, all of these things are traumatic. And then from there, kind of looking at the nervous system. And so it kind of went back through that way for me. And then it was like, if we are going to support people in their recovery, then we have to talk about trauma in all of its senses, and stress, you know, burnout, looking at, you know, COVID. So they're talking about COVID as trauma now, and a lot of people were like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. But when you talk about, you know, a dysregulated nervous system and chronic stress, then people can understand it. And so yeah, I guess that brought me to this point of going, everyone needs to, you know, from corporate through to schools, need to have an understanding of trauma in order to be able to look after people, whether it's, you know, through diversity and inclusion programs, or whether it's through, you know, supporting people that have had, you know, ACEs or very obvious traumatic experiences. It goes through all the layers.
Yeah, and I think remembering at all times, and this was one of the things that was a bit of a game changer for me, was when I understood that trauma isn't the event. Trauma is the internal experience that we have as the result of an event. So therefore, what is traumatic to one may not be to another. So we can't just label something as traumatic or not traumatic, because it is how we experience it internally, and everything that has gone on in our lives before that will then kind of it leads into perhaps whether that's traumatic for us, because it's about whether our nervous system is regulated, whether we've been taught to self-soothe. I always use the bullying as a really good example when I'm talking to my clients, and I guess this leads nicely into how being trauma informed and doing my trauma coaching training has changed the way that I work with clients so much, because when I'm able to explain things in this way to them, it's like I see a physical reaction happen when a client understands why they are having an experience that they are having that might be different to the experience that somebody else has had from the same event. And one of the examples that I always use is bullying. And I say to my clients, imagine that you have been at school and you have been bullied, and you come home from school and you tell your parents that you've been bullied, and your parents say, well, it must have been something you did. What did you do wrong? And you get criticized and judged and invalidated, and basically or silenced or neglected or ignored. You are then left with this feeling, with this experience. So not only have you been bullied, but you have then been left alone to experience the emotions of that bullying alone. Now imagine that has happened at school. You come home and you go to your parents, you go to your mother, and you explain that you've been bullied, and your mother puts her arms around you and soothes you and says how awful that must have been for you. that must be really, really hard. Why don't you tell me about it? Why don't we talk about this? Why don't we go to the school and get something done about this? Two very, very different experiences. And the likelihood is that if that, as a child, you have had that soothing and nurturing experience after something that could be traumatic, you are then able to regulate your nervous system and may not experience that bullying as a trauma.
Yeah. And that's a really good story and a point, because I think that being trauma informed as a coach or therapist or clinician allows you to do the second, allows you to stay with what happened to you, what's going on for you, and allows you to stay with the emotional material and the younger parts of you. Because if you haven't got a trauma-informed lens and you don't understand yet the neurobiology, the nervous system, dysregulation, dissociation, and all those things that I think with an understanding of trauma, thank God we've all got to, you can't sit and stay with people through that kind of trauma-informed perspective, because trauma-informed isn't just about being nice, is it, or kind? It's about how able you are to hold somebody and help to regulate or co-regulate them when they're in that emotional triggered place.
Yeah, and I think that it's a lot of it for me is about being able to stay in that very non-judgmental place. And if we haven't solved that relationship with ourselves, where we're no longer in judgment of ourselves, then that will transfer to our clients. So I think, again, this is the importance of recognizing our own trauma, working on that, and then being able to use that experience to work with our clients. So it all kind of marries together.
Yeah, and I think that as you described, those kind of the physical shift in a client, or those light bulb moments of when you can give some psychoeducation around these subjects, or you can hold conversations around it, and for them to be able to suddenly see their own experiences of trauma and be held in that, but also be able to talk to those parts of themselves and give tools and strategies for them to be able to move forward. And I think people get very scared of I don't do trauma work because I'm not a trauma therapist, and part of this is there's so much that we can do which is safe and which is helpful in order for people to get to a point where perhaps they are going to do that deep dive into EMDR, or they're going to do that deep work. But there's so much that we can do in terms of holding that space, being able to talk about what would work for you, for your inner child, to talk to those parts of themselves and be able to develop relationships, which is really exciting, because so many people don't have access to the care that perhaps they need, and we can be that kind of that bridge builder essentially. And yeah, clients I've seen, just that all my clients have trauma basically.
And if we were to relabel it, guys, as chronic stress, instead of trauma, because I know so many people have a difficulty with actually the word trauma, but if we were to label it chronic stress, I think, Mel, what you were saying earlier is right, in that our nervous system can only take so much stacking, and really, if it gets stacked too much at some point, everybody's system is just going to kind of collapse and go, no more, I can't take it. And I think, what's traumatizing, as you were saying, for one, isn't necessarily traumatic for somebody else, or maybe they've had more resilience around them, or they've had more safe others or more community, or maybe they haven't had the early attachment difficulties that other people have had. But undoubtedly, I was saying at the beginning of COVID how much of a trauma it would be felt as like for some people, because it was almost like COVID was the straw that broke the camel's back. So maybe it was the thing that just stacked up an already dysregulated nervous system. And I guess why I'm making this point is, you know, if your clients or who you're working with, or even you watching this, aren't in chronic stress or don't have trauma, we are living in quite a traumagenic society at the moment, you know. And if people's systems aren't stacked at the moment, I'm not putting it out there, but I think we all need to have an awareness of trauma and how to work with it, or at least how to signpost people onto the right help. Because God, if I'd been signposted way earlier, I mean, I'm not looking back and saying if only, because we can't look back, but I don't know what you guys think about, you know, if you'd known about trauma earlier, or seen things through the lens of trauma, or even been signposted, like Mandy, I know you were really lucky, thank God, and had an amazing GP, but we need to get this message out there to people.
Yeah, and I mean, I certainly was in France, right? But I've lived in France for sort of 16 years, but you know, my trauma predates that, and I certainly went to, you know, I'm not discrediting the British system, but that's just my experience, that I certainly went to, you know, GPs about my drinking and was told to just moderate, here's the card, this how many units go away. And it's like, I've probably been trying to do that for quite a while, you know, talking about my experiences, you know, in even having, you know, help with a termination when I was a young person. There was no aftercare around that to look after just that one experience, right, which was traumatic. And I know with clients that I've worked that they've, you know, have had trauma, or they've had situations and they've been suggested to have a glass of wine at the end of the day. You know, there's a big kind of separation between, you know, addiction, especially around alcohol, and mental health services and trauma services that don't connect and talk to each other. So there's a lot that is being misunderstood and represented in that area. So I certainly know that it could have been caught earlier, you know.
Yeah, I have had, and I talk about this a lot, which is my experience of finally finding that link between my trauma and my addiction. And for so many years, I was, I guess, shown that they were two very different things. The message that I was given was that my addiction was one thing and my trauma was another. And so, yeah, it's just unbelievable. And I think I just want to make this point really clear as well. When I talk about addiction, I mean, mine was to substances and to alcohol, but we can put addiction with it. It's such an umbrella. Yeah. From everything from, you know, shopping to online to gaming to sex to codependency, all of these things, which I would even take away the label addiction and just put symptoms of trauma, yeah. Which is what I now understand they are. But for so many years, I didn't understand that the addiction was a manifestation of the trauma that I had inside of me. And so every time I went to, I guess, try and get into recovery from the addiction, it was all very much from like a mindset perspective or a 12-step perspective. And I'm not knocking 12 steps because it saved my life and is absolutely incredible. But in my opinion, isn't trauma informed enough. So there was never, and it wasn't until really my second stay in rehab that I finally had a therapist there who helped me to start to understand that link. And I remember the words that were said to me, because I was sitting in this therapist's office and I said to her, well, alcohol was my primary, that was the gateway for me. And she said, oh no, it wasn't. She said, trauma was the gateway for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And suddenly it was like this penny just dropped and this light bulb went on, and I got it. And that was all it took, was just somebody that understood trauma, that understood that my addiction was a manifestation of that, and that could explain it to me in a way that I could embody. And if it hadn't have been for that, I'm not sure what would have happened, because I would have continued to believe that I needed to treat my trauma and my addiction as separate entities. So trauma-informed care for me, I believe, has literally saved my life.
Yeah. I hear you. I think that's the power of it, and I definitely think that can be the power of it. And you know, I can hear some people saying, well, isn't trauma a catch-all, and doesn't it apply to everybody and everything? And in a way, yes, because, you know, mental health for me is about our nervous system. Mental is not about our mind. Point to our mind. Where is our mind? You know, is that the brain? No, because it's not the brain that's, you know, people always say to me, you know, I've got a problem with my brain. No, you haven't. You haven't. Everything is connected and everything is attached. And if you want to look anywhere, look at your nervous system. And, you know, that's been trying to protect you. Mm-hmm. So all parts of you have been trying to protect you. And addiction is just a coping strategy, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, for us not being able to soothe, or been taught or know how to soothe and regulate ourselves. So, you know, so I'm really hoping that people, you know, if they're not signed up and you're not coming on the training, I really hope that if you're working with people in any way, shape or form, that you consider, if not hours and if not this next week, or what we're going on to do, which is, you know, a 2-day. And currently the three of us are in the process of training. We got 40 American recovery coaches.
More than that, but yeah, around that.
Yeah, who are amazing and a great bunch. And we're like 6 weeks into a 16-week program, you know, so we really are doing a massive deep dive of training these guys really on how to be with trauma and trauma survivors, and how to not only deal with what's out there, but also within their own nervous systems as well. So, you know, us three are on a mission.
And so can I just interrupt very quickly, Lou, because
just right as I was in my flow about
sorry,
it's all right, she always does it to me. If you
I know. You forgive me every time, Lou. Victoria's just put a really good point here, which is something that we haven't even touched on yet.
Oh gosh, thanks, Victoria.
Yeah, which is that, so she says, so much of my trauma came in the form of physical pain and no one linked them for years. And absolutely, and this is again just another reason why being trauma informed is so important, not just if you're a coach, but for any health well-being practitioner.
Yeah.
Because there are so many symptoms of trauma. It's not just addiction. There is pain, illness, there are
myalgia, chronic fatigue, migraines, eczema. You know, I hate to say it, and sometimes I do say it, cancer.
You know, well, chronic stress, I mean, is the stress on the body is what leads to a lot of these diseases. And even I think about nutritionists and personal trainers when they see people that have disordered eating or disordered around exercise, or personal trainers that are trying to motivate people to exercise and can't understand why their clients haven't got the motivation. A lot of the time it's trauma. They're in their dorsal vagal. Or when they get people coming with disordered eating and they can't understand why these people aren't managing, it's trauma. And this is why it's so important. So sorry, no, that's
a brilliant point, and totally agree.
Sorry, Lou. So do you want to tell people what we're actually doing?
I know, I can't remember. Not quite what I was going to say, except for I think I was trying to say we want more people on the mission with us.
Yeah.
You know, we want more people that are coming onto the voyage with us, because once you're on the voyage with us and in the trauma-informed program and all the rest of it, we can all get out there and make more of a difference.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, and that's what we're trying to do, isn't it? Really, is change that lens through which people view others and themselves and then the world.
Yeah. And I think there's always, you know, there's this big message at the moment about be kind. And I think we can really look at that from a trauma perspective, because I think I certainly know that until I became trauma informed, I think there's always been a kindness to me, but there is so much less judgment now that I understand trauma, and this be kind message can be so much more profound if we are coming from understanding society, understanding humanity through a trauma lens.
Yeah, I agree. Mand, anything else to say?
No, sorry, I've got like the dog walking in, children crawling on the floor. I've got like someone doing work outside, so it's like a whole sensory processing thing happening here.
Oh,
brilliant.
No, I mean, I completely agree, and I think, you know, when we're talking about what's been the shift for us professionally, personally, you know, understanding trauma is the way that I walk through the world, and that understanding of all levels of society, you know, to the what's happening in the criminal justice system, through to, you know, what's happening in you know, poor areas, to just every level of, you know, people that I see on the streets, and just walking through the world with compassion and kindness, and that's a two-way win, right? It feels good for you, and it feels meaningful and purposeful in lives where perhaps some of us have been searching for that meaning, but it's good for those too. So it is bigger than just kind of helping your clients. It really is a shift in how you kind of walk through the world, which feels really good and important.
Yeah, even changes how you view the leadership election at the moment.
You're clearly much further through your trauma journey than I am through mine.
Like, oh my God, can we not take some trauma-informed work into government, please?
But you know, as you were sort of saying, I mean, it's even that kind of, when, you know, through leadership, as you were saying, or through, you know, being a personal trainer, to the point of just not of giving people their own, empowering people to make their own choices. That's the fundamental part, right, of being trauma informed, is being kind, compassionate, and letting people lead their own journeys rather than telling them what they need or labeling them. And so I think even on that level, when you're working with someone, man to woman, woman to man, child to adult, all of those different relationships, you're going to view it through a lens of holding that person as an individual, and making sure that they feel some safety and secureness with you.
I'm getting goosebumps about that, because I think that, you know, that whole trauma-informed lens of, as you said, empowering others and choice, but also that thing that we've been talking about so much, other than trust as well, is that safety. Because, you know, we know through Porges and polyvagal and everything that we do with others, is that at the end of the day, we just all want to feel safe.
You know. And especially with how destabilizing everything around us is, if we can, as you say, Lou, stay in that boat and ride the waves, and staying connected to ourselves, being in relationship with ourselves, so that we are connected and grounded and safe, and then we could be that for other people. And I think, Mandy, like you said, everybody from like your dog to the next door neighbor, to, you know, the postman, to everybody in the world. And I know that sometimes sounds like, and I know I joke with you, Lou, about world domination, and I don't mean it in world domination. I just mean it in terms of like how powerful this kind of, and I do think it's a movement.
Yeah,
you know, being trauma informed is a movement, because it can change the world. I really believe that. And call me, you know, grandiose, or call me kind of away with the fairies, call me whatever you want, but I truly believe that it can change the world. So we're just starting in this little way here, but we haven't even really told people what we're doing next week, Lou. I know some people know, but why don't you tell everybody what it is?
Well, we kind of have. I think we've told you. We you know, we've basically said that we are trying to embody all of those principles and all of those ethics and that lens into an initial 3-hour training. So I think the doors close on Monday. So where are we today? Thursday. So you've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday to sign up. There are a few places left. It's next Wednesday, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. UK time. The website, actually we'll put the link underneath.
We'll put the link
underneath here. We would love to have more of you from this group join us, because I don't know, it feels like home to me, this group. And you know, there's a good membership here now, and we are blessed, thank goodness, with, other than us three running it, we've got some amazing people in this group too. So it is a safe place. I mean, I know we get the odd spam, but other than the odd spammer, it's a really safe place. So if we're going to start a revolution together, Trauma Thrivers, you've got to be on the boat with us. Like, we can't do it just the three of us on our own. We're going to need you behind us, charging that trauma-informed revolution all together. So we'd love you to come and join us next Wednesday if you're not already. And if you can't for any reason, we might be doing it again at some stage in the future.
Or you can get it on replay.
Or you can get
if you sign up to this one, but you can't make it live, then we will have a link to a replay that will go out sort of a couple of days after. You can watch it on that. Or as Lou said, if you do want to be live, then we might possibly be doing another live one at some point. But in the year, maybe later on in the year.
If you can't join us, join in the group. Get posting, get sharing anything that's trauma informed. We want to hear from you, the community too, don't we, girls?
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody watching now, I think we've lost a few viewers over the last 10 minutes. I think maybe people only had half an hour for lunch, and we've, as usual, gone on a little bit longer than what we thought we would. Please. So, but if there is anybody watching now that has any questions, pop them in the chat and we can answer them as we're kind of finishing up. Or if you're watching it on replay and you've got any questions about the masterclass, please pop it in the comments. We will be watching out for those, and we will answer anything that any questions that you have.
Yeah. Just to say, it will give you the basics of understanding how to have a trauma-informed lens, you know, in that 3 hours.
Yeah, it's kind of like the first step, isn't it? The first kind of step to becoming a trauma-informed practitioner. And also, even if you don't think, even if you're not sure, this is just like a really good way to come and discover whether you think this is something you need. It might be that you sort of go, oh, well, this was really interesting, and now I've got some really good information that I can kind of start to use and just be a bit more informed and a bit more understanding with people, with the clients that are coming to me, or a bit more understanding in society in general. Or if you think, wow, this is going to be really useful and really helpful, then we're going to have other trainings that take you deeper into it.
So just to clarify, is this training open to practitioners only, or is it open to people that are on their own trauma journey and want to?
Well, I've said if somebody wants to join and they're on their own trauma healing journey and they aren't a practitioner, that's absolutely fine. But I wouldn't suggest they come at the beginning of their journey.
Okay.
So if they're very new into trauma and they haven't done any healing or processing yet, I wouldn't advise it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure, then you can just send us a message and we'll talk.
Yeah, if you're not sure, send us a message. Or if you're not sure and you've got a healthcare practitioner who is trauma informed, or a therapist or somebody else, or a coach, check it out maybe with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kate McGowan, hi Kate. Kate's just asked us, so lovely to have you watching. So is this a trauma informed basics masterclass?
Yeah,
it is the basics. It is the basics.
Yeah.
So, what's trauma, the neurobiology, the brain stuff. There will be some tips, I think, on how to work with it and hold it, but it's not a deep dive in 3 hours.
No,
It's an introduction.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's it for questions. We've had comments. Thank you everybody that's joined us. Victoria, Hillary, hi mum. Everyone's been watching. Hello mum. Liz has been watching. Mel Pegley's been watching.
Hello Mel.
And making comments from everybody. So thank you everyone that's
thanks guys.
Really lovely to have you with us.
Yeah, lovely. And we will be back soon. And some of you will see next Wednesday.